love of food, the simple feeling that appears in cultures across the world. For many, food has always been a celebration of tradition and an expression of identity. In our increasingly connected world, although not everyone has the means to do so, most Americans are seeking to expand their palates by trying things from other cuisines almost daily. Countries like France, Thailand, and Italy are revered by America and other Western nations for their food. Yet the Russian diet is often stereotyped as dreary, plain, cold, and depressing, a lot like stereotypes of Russia itself. Is it true that Russians only eat borscht? Do they even eat non-root vegetables or fruit? What's a typical Russian diet? We interviewed several UVA students at random to find out what they thought about these questions.
What do you think about when someone says Russian food?
Honestly, I have no idea what any Russian food is.
The first thing I think of is like onions, cabbage, beets, radishes.
I don't really know, honestly. I really don't.
That's a great question. I don't eat a lot of Russian food, so I couldn't name anything.
I don't know. I've never had Russian food before.
Potatoes. That's about it.
As we just heard, the average American either doesn't know much about Russian cuisine or has negative preconceived notions. This lack of knowledge and negativity is why we are tackling this stereotype. We aim to show that these notions about Russian cuisine are inaccurate. Russian food is demonstrative of Russia's long and turbulent national and cultural history. With so much to cover, let's get started.
Any in-depth discussion of Russian culture, especially one about food, should start with a look at the nation's geography and climate. Although Russia might be the biggest country on Earth, with enormous stretches of flat land, historically, only about 10% of the country has been suitable for agricultural production. With its exceptionally cold climate, only hardy crops like grains, beets, cabbages, apples, and potatoes could be widely grown. To combat these limitations, medieval Russian peasants often used a method called economizing nutrition, a diet of fat and carb-heavy foods like black bread, root vegetables, sauerkraut, and kvass, a rye non-alcoholic beer famed for its many flavors. With this emphasis on grain and salty, savory tastes, Russian cuisine wasn't shockingly different from that of other medieval European cultures. In fact, Russia's cold climate offered it a unique advantage. Food could be easily preserved. As Italian traveler Marco Foscarino wrote in 1537, "The peasants have all varieties of meats. In the winter, meat can survive for an entire month. They have wonderful fowl, and the White Lakes give a great variety of large and small fish."
As Russia began to open up to the world in the 17th century, a few factors limited the introduction of its food culture to Western Europe. Although we previously mentioned that Russia had a lot of culinary potential, one of the first things international observers might have noticed was the strict Eastern Orthodox tradition of fasting. The Russian Orthodox calendar associated saints, festivals, and events with complex fasting rules detailing about 180 days of abstention from animal products, dairy, and oils, including almost every Wednesday and Friday. Between fasts, people, especially those of the nobility, took the opportunity to consume large meals filled with meat, a practice that was often off-putting to foreign visitors. They did not realize that these occasions often followed extremely long fasts, such as the 40-day fast before Christmas.
In the late 18th century, Russia's most Western empress, Catherine the Great, introduced a variety of German and French customs to her country's upper society. When it came to food, though, her poor sense of taste made her courtly table famously second-rate. The nobility surrounding her often chose to emphasize style and presentation of dishes instead of cooking skill. As a result, many outsiders perceived Russia as a country with substandard food. The focus on the Tsarina's court overshadowed practices that incorporated foreign cuisine, such as the innovative combination of French and Russian techniques by many Russian restaurants in St. Petersburg and Moscow. In high society, food was served in courses instead of a single meal, with popular Russian soups like svikolnik, borscht, and solyanka becoming more refined to present a beautiful first course. World-famous dishes like beef stroganoff and veal orloff were both created by French chefs for Russian aristocrats. Caviar from Russia, an always popular fish product that could be eaten during a fast, became extraordinarily popular and expensive in other countries as a luxury item during the 18th and 19th centuries. On the whole, a couple of political and cultural quirks made the richness of Imperial Russian cuisine a well-kept secret from outsiders.
Unfortunately, during the Soviet era, Russian food began to be seen in a strongly negative light. Soviet reforms limited what most Russians were able to eat, stemming from the Bolshevik and later Communist Party view that food was made to sustain life rather than to explore taste. Government-sponsored doctors and chemists calculated the caloric and nutritional intake required by each specific working section of the population. The resulting food was drab, tasteless, often covered in mayonnaise, and rarely used fresh ingredients. The reintroduction of economized nutrition was also made necessary by the Soviet Union's consistent inability to feed its own people. In the first half of the 1900s, Russia experienced 2 famines, each of which took the lives of millions. The first major famine was the Russian famine of 1921 to 1922 during the Bolshevik era, caused by a combination of the Russian Civil War and an unfortunately timed drought. It is estimated that around 5 million people died as a result. Around a decade later, Stalin's 5-year plan caused the Soviet famine of 1932 to 1933. Beginning in 1929, the policies decreased the steady availability of food to urban areas, leading to infamous images of empty grocery shelves. Historian Robert Conquest uses census data to estimate that 7 million deaths occurred, though he notes that nobody may know the true number. These controversial policies and their traumatic effects continued to color Western perceptions of Russian food for decades after the fall of the Soviet Union.
You're right. Modern Russia isn't Soviet Russia, and a lot of what we still think about Russian food isn't accurate. In December of 1990, the Congress of People's Deputies of the Russian Republic enacted a number of laws legalizing private farms and allowing them to perform basic operations without the need for state supervision. Over time, Russian food production was completely modernized, and average people largely returned to eating traditional Russian dishes. The sophisticated Moscow elite, however, still largely dined at Italian, Japanese, and other foreign restaurants until 2014, when President Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea and responded to sanctions by placing an embargo on many European foods. The embargo sparked a revival of traditional food, with Vladimir Mukin, the head chef at a world-class Moscow restaurant called White Rabbit, heading a Russian cuisine evolution. To see for ourselves, we had the UVA dining staff prepare a traditional Russian meal for us.
My name is Reed Owen. I'm the executive chef here at Runk Dining Hall for UVA Dining. The soup we went with was kind of a sour and spicy fish soup. It's one of the most classical in Russian cuisine. And that's what makes the cuisine so special, is that it has such simple ingredients, but the way they do it makes it come out in such a way that makes it as if you use 15 different spices in it. It's so flavorful and packed with texture. The entree I chose tonight was chicken Kiev, and the reason that we chose it was because of its classical nature in Russian cuisine, and because the controversial, argumentative between Eastern European nations about who actually created this dish. The side dish I chose was pelmeni, another classic Russian dumpling stuffed with meat. Everybody has this concept of Eastern European food being bland, being flavorless, peasant food, peasant dishes, but I find that is the best food, honestly, because it's simple food that can be flavored with elegance. And now that we're in a time where we can have access to all these different ingredients and everything like that we can incorporate into these classical dishes, it can actually broadens your horizon for these amazing flavors that you can create in such a simple dish. Like what I gave you guys tonight was so simple, but seasoned so perfectly and seasoned with finesse, it can be one of the best tasting dishes that you've ever had.
Our shared meal helped us understand the little details that characterize how ingredients work with each other in every culture's cuisine. For example, we were a little apprehensive when we saw the same pelmeni and cream dish from the Christmas Eve movie, but we realized that the cream actually added a burst of sour flavor to the savory dumplings. After dismissing certain stereotypes stemming from cultural misunderstandings in the Soviet era, we ended up enjoying a tasty, filling, and nutritious meal, and can confirm that Russia has a vibrant food culture that will hold its own as the country asserts itself in the world.